Good morning. Please bow your heads. I thought today would be appropriate to have the peace prayer of St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The things we think, say, and do.
It is the truth. It is fair to all concerned. Will build goodwill and better friendships. Will be beneficial to all concerned.
Mark, are you ready to give us the Sergeant at Arms report?
Yes, I will. Before I sit back down. Good morning, everyone. So this morning we have 38 members present. We have one visitor. That's Scott Witt, and he is actually a guest of Guilford Rotary. He's represented by our speaker, Gary Everhart. So welcome both these guys today. That's it for the day.
Rick Martin,
Sir,
with our anniversaries and birthdays report.
and we do. Max Kerner, Max here today? Well, we had an anniversary on Monday the 7th, and we have, well, Max Kerner again for a birthday. We missed him on the 1st, and we've got a couple of wedding anniversaries today. Chris Justice, where's Chris?
Celebrating his wedding.
Well, they've had 5 years, he and Stephanie, and then Steve Wirtz. Is Steve there today?
No.
Steve might be working on a deck.
Yeah, well, we're 0 for 3. He and his wife Tana are celebrating their 35th anniversary. So when you see them, be sure and tell them congratulations. Happy anniversary. That's it for the day.
All right.
All right.
Just a couple announcements I have as we continue to tidy up the email distribution list. Just let either me or let Steve know if you're not getting routine emails from the club and you feel like you should be. Let us get your the email that you want to have those go to. We have a baseball game, Family of Rotary baseball game, Sunday over in Winston-Salem. I'm going. I don't know if anyone else has gotten tickets and heading out, but tomorrow's the last day, and I sent a link to the email in the last couple of days with that information if you want to do that. The next board meeting, ordinarily our board meetings are the second Tuesday of each month. We're going to change that up. It's going to be Wednesday, the second Wednesday this month only, because of conflict with meeting space. If anybody wants to attend that, you're always welcome to attend the board meetings. If you'll email me ahead of time and just let me know, that'd be great. Do any of our board chairmen have announcements they'd like to make? Okay. Randy, good to see you. This is the last meeting before your epic ride. All right. Randy's going bike riding across Africa. What was that?
Hopefully I'm coming back.
Yeah, we want you to come back.
Yeah, don't feed the line.
Yeah, don't be riding halfway across Africa.
I told David I love him if I see a line coming, we kick his bike over. I know I can't outride him.
It's quite a ride. We'll be looking forward to a program on the ride across Africa. That's all the announcements I have. How about some happy dollars?
How about some happy
Got some
dollars?
pinned up happy dollars.
That's what I'm talking about. All right. It takes everybody a while. They go, oh, yeah. Oh.
This goes out to Dr. Andrews, who took very good care of my cat last week. And always does excellent work. Thank you.
post yesterday or the day before about my husband doing the Trailblaze Challenge. He's going to walk 26 miles for Make-A-Wish. And I want to thank Mike and also Jimmy Kennedy for contributing. And if y'all find out you have a little bit extra cash, we appreciate the help. Because he and his team were challenged to raise $7,500. So, thank you.
Or as Bobby Christensen would say, a trip to the mailbox. Before break. Chip, you got one?
Man, it's slim today. Yeah, my son Wilder is coming home Friday night at midnight. What is about late night with these kids anyway? He's been gone since January 9th to Chile, Colombia, Bolivia, Peru, Cartagena, Medellin. He took the Pablo Escobar tour yesterday. He's a really nice policeman, Dad. He worked with the police back then. And I said, did you ever stop to think, Wilder, the reason he survived and he's still giving guided tours these days is maybe he worked both sides of that police thing. Be careful. Friday night, midnight. Anybody want to go down?
Great.
Yeah, I've got my grandson with me this week, and we're going water skiing today. He's a savvy grandparent, doesn't get any better than that.
Well, as Grandpappy Lewis told me one time, he said, attitudes are contagious, and I'm pretty sure mine could kill you.
All set. Okay. This morning, Gary Earhart is going to speak with us about the CART Fund. As you guys probably know, CART is an acronym for Coins for Alzheimer's Research Trust. This is a really important research that's being done because basically everybody in this room has been touched by it one way or another. And in honor of the speech today, we are going to institute a new policy in the club. One thing that it really gets on me is when somebody's phone goes off during the Pledge of Allegiance, a prayer, a sermon, or a Rotary speech.
Or a root canal.
Usually, it's because somebody forgets to turn off their phone. So I thought we'd make a new rule in the club. If your phone goes off, put $5 in the cart bucket.
Wow.
Okay. Or we can make it a team thing, and if anybody's phone goes off, everybody in the club puts $1 in. You guys can pick. But I'd say, you know, it's good having individuals put in $5 whenever their phone goes off. Okay. So that'll be the new thing. Anyway, Gary is a Tar Heel, born and bred. He was born in Chapel Hill when his father was a senior in school there, and then he went to school there 18 years later. So he is quite a Tar Heel fan, I'm sure. He's been married to Carrie for 12 years, has 2 kids, Emerson and Oliver. In fact, if you were at the district conference in Roanoke, you probably saw him shaking down folks for coins. In fact, he might have been hit up already.
Let me say real quick too, Dan Quinn, you still owe me $1 from that? Okay.
What? He's a golfer, plays soccer. His kids are swimmers at Grandover.
Grandover.
And now works with Thriving Financial, faith-based financial services company that helps members be wise with their money so they can live generously. I think it's a great way to work. He's been a member of Guilford Rotary since 2003, served on the board there, so please help me welcome Gary Everhart.
Morning, it is so great to be back. I recognize a lot of faces in here, and there we go. A little technologically challenged. I'm a Gen Xer. Any millennials in here? Because I'm going to pick on you. Okay, good. I will do a little walking around, but for the first part of this, I want to tell you, my name is Gary Everhart Jr., and I want my children, the ones you just heard about, to know Alzheimer's. Not the Alzheimer's that you and I know today, not the Alzheimer's that affects nearly every family in this room today. Not the Alzheimer's that took my granddaddy away from our family in 2006, before he died on Christmas Day 2 years later. flip through a couple of these just for time's sake today. I think most of you know what Alzheimer's disease is. It's not normal aging. It is a complex, age-related, insidious, irreversible brain disorder. I added the word insidious in there because I see Alzheimer's as really the closest thing to evil here that we have on the face of the planet. Right now it's irreversible, but we're hoping to change that. You can see how it begins, and it ultimately ends in death. Many of you know folks who've had heart disease. They may not have completely overcome it, but my grandfather had a quadruple bypass 21 years ago. He's 89. Still chugging along, works in his garden almost every day. Many of us know cancer survivors. Folks who've beaten cancer, and if you're cancer-free for 5 years, you may consider yourself cured. But Alzheimer's wins every time. This is a little bit of the history of CART. 23 years ago, in Sumter, South Carolina, that's my only South Carolina hat I've got there. They initiated an effort to prove the CART concept works. They conducted an 8-month testing program. It was highly successful. How did that start? A gentleman by the name of Roger Ackerman, whose mother-in-law was dealing with Alzheimer's at the time, which meant that he and his wife were dealing with Alzheimer's because she lived with him. He had heard one day from a friend that over $8 billion a day changes hands in coins. This was in 1995. That night he woke up, middle of the night, and thought, wow, what a great idea, and brought a little bucket into his club the next day. And he shook down, just like my children did at Roanoke, every member for all their loose change, and some folding bills as well. Over the next few months, that club raised over $4,000, and he thought, gosh, if our club can do this, why couldn't a lot of others? So that's when CART was founded. 7690 joined the fight in the year 2000. I learned about CART from a Summit Rotarian by the name of Steele Smith, because buckets had been left over at Starmount where we met every week, and I didn't know what they were, but I knew our club didn't have anything to do with it. Summit meets there on Friday. We used to meet there on Tuesdays. So I asked around and got introduced to Steele, and he says, hey man, this is a Rotary deal, and it's really great. So our club adopted it. We've been getting it out. In 2011, I was asked to begin a 2-year stint as the CART Fund district chair, and so I'm now 6 years into that 2-year stint. April of 1999, we had finally raised $100,000, and that money went to our very first grantee by the name of Dr. Alan Levy. He's at Emory. I'm going to skip over the first part here for the sake of time, but I'm going to talk to you about Dr. Alan Levy a little bit more. He now leads a research team that has now received over $7 million in a grant from the National Institutes of Health. How did he get that funding? Well, he never would have been able to parlay his results into that kind of support without the seed money from CART over 17 years ago, 18 years ago now. So that ROI is 70 to 1. That's phenomenal. But because of the National Institutes of Health and the information that they were getting out as well, he's received $25 million in private funding. So when you put $1 into the bucket, might end up being 70 bucks, might end up being 100. Think about it as you consider where you give and how you give. This is a cross-section of a brain that shows the plaques and tangles that form in an Alzheimer's patient. Alzheimer's kills neurons. It literally destroys our brain cells. There's over 100 billion. And it destroys our memories, destroys some people's lives. My grandfather, by the time he passed, probably had seen shrinkage in his brain to the tune of that on the right there, up to 40% brain shrinkage that we see. This is an MRI that shows a normal brain up top. This is a millennial's brain. I'm sorry, guys, I just had to do that. This is a brain with people with Alzheimer's, and we can see the inflammation that's going on there. So, this was our 2018 CART board meeting. We had Rick Snyder, Claudia Kennedy, Randy and Rita, yours truly, Dr. Karen Pollard. Has she visited your club yet with a big? Beach ball? Do you folks not remember because we're having issues here? Yeah? Yeah?
Actually, she hopped across the stage.
Yes, she did.
So,
And she told a joke. Can anybody remember the punchline of that joke?
that's right.
Give that frog a loan. Yep. So, when we talk about Alzheimer's, we talk about folks a lot of times who are already in the throes of Alzheimer's. But what about those of us who are here today? What about those of us who haven't been diagnosed yet? Would anyone in here like to reduce their risk of Alzheimer's, maybe by over 50%? Now's the time when you raise your hand and you go like this. Thank you. So there's a couple things that you can do. Number one, Dr. Pollard probably told you about exercise. Daily exercise, or at least 5 times a week. Daily exercise can really help you reduce your risk of Alzheimer's. The brain, technically, is a muscle. You could do a brain boot camp with Dr. Pollard. Speaking of Dr. Pollard, she recently helped me take the first steps to ensure that even if I develop dementia in my 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s, that I'll have a baseline test that any doctor can refer back to. A test that I took that I was in my mid-40s, and I am in my mid-40s now. I took it back in May. And if you want to be prepared for any potential diagnosis of dementia, I hope you'll consider taking that test as well. But what's special about our CART grant recipients, like Dr. Alan Levy? Well, I can tell you about his specific research. It's a little bit over my head, so I've picked another one that's a little easier to understand. They help us lay folks learn terms like tau, beta, amyloid, plaques, and even microglia. Microglia are the little soldiers in our brains that help repair the damage from concussions and other trauma when we're younger. But unfortunately, they compound the problem of Alzheimer's when plaques and tangles begin to show up, usually later in life. So here's a hypothesis. Can we manipulate those microglia, reprogram them, or simply turn them off? That's the challenge being taken up by one of our recent grantees a couple years ago. But maybe, just maybe, could we encourage them to eat the plaques that are forming in our brains? That's an interesting concept. Yes, that's the newest hypothesis by Dr. Terrence Town of the University of Southern California. Dr. Town received $250,000 at our CART board meeting back in May, and he's already shown the promise that these little soldiers could have in helping to stave off or even potentially cure this insidious disease. So we learn new and exciting advancements, therapies, and physiological information every year about Alzheimer's at the annual board meeting when the doctors present their research findings to us. Then we leave committed to raise even more. We've given $750,000 to 3 or 4 of our researchers the past 2 years. And 100% of the money that goes in the buckets. And by the way, let me mention this real quick. So we are CART, Coins for Alzheimer's Research Trust, right? Well, the C stands for coins, but it also stands for cash, it also stands for checks, and it also stands for credit cards. You actually know what that is, don't you? One of our millennials right here. Yes, you can actually scan that and go directly to our website. Thanks for letting me pick on you. To make a tax-deductible contribution. And when you make that contribution, you'll know that 100% of the money that you give is going directly to research. When you think about the different organizations that you do support, when you think about the fraud that's taken place from certain organizations, we're committed. Roger Ackerman is committed. And when Roger's committed to do something, we're going to get it done. Speaking of which, our goal is to raise over $1 million annually by 2020. How are we going to do that? Well, with folks just like you committed to updating your Amazon account to smile.amazon.com. By show of hands, how many people here shop on Amazon? Keep your hand up if you've gone to Smile and actually, fantastic. Whatever charity that you've linked to there, I know that charity appreciates it. If you haven't yet linked to it, I put a green sheet of paper on your table. Actually, Chip helped me with that. Thank you, Chip. If you'll take a picture of that today, and then obviously, if you think about the CART Fund, then that would be awesome. If there's another organization that you want to support, by all means support it. Most purchases on Amazon, 1% of that purchase can go to the charity of your choice. And that is the easiest way that you can give money automatically when you're shopping on Amazon.com. But how else could you help? Well, you could grab one of the blue buckets over here. I brought some extras. You could place it at your office. If you work for corporate America or know folks who do, you can check on corporate matching for charitable giving. My company, Thrivent Financial, matches every penny Carrie and I give directly to CART each year. You could hold a fundraiser in your loved one's name. You could even consider an estate gift. Carrie knows I don't want a lot of flowers at my funeral. No disrespect to flower shops, but you could give $50 to CART in honor or memory for someone you know whose life has been forever changed by the only cause of death in the top 5 that is increasing. Earlier I mentioned heart disease, cancer, stroke, heart attacks. The incidence of death from every one of those top killers is heading this way. Alzheimer's is heading this way. So we know a couple of ways to potentially reduce Alzheimer's risk. We've got exercise. We've got, I found this at Costco the other day. It's called liquid turmeric. Anybody here take turmeric or curcumin on a regular basis? You're probably lowering your body's inflammation by doing that. That could be good for arthritis, could be good for diabetes, could be good for a lot of things. I'll state up front, I'm not a doctor, I don't play one on TV, and I did not stay at a Holiday Inn Express last week. However, there's a lot of good research that shows that turmeric, especially this bioavailable or whatever they call it, could be really good for you. It's on sale at Costco right now, and no, I do not profit from any of that. But I would encourage you to take turmeric. Or if you like a good curry, as Faraday would say, then go eat Indian food. Indian food, especially curry, has turmeric in it. From an exercise perspective, I just want to say up front too that Randy, what you're going to do there in Africa, once you're done with that, you don't ever need to exercise again. You're good. That would be fantastic. But what about those of us who will develop Alzheimer's regardless of our genetics, diet, or even a memory like a steel trap? Many of you have heard stories about Dean Smith and how he could recall specific moments at specific games from decades earlier, and how he had maybe saved that timeout that he should have used, or how he made a substitution that maybe he shouldn't have made. I'll tell you a personal story. So one of my fraternity brothers, Ross Rollins, was up in Washington, D.C. in 1993. My Tar Heels had just won the national championship. This was before you were born, Chris. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to pick on you anymore. Ross was walking into a convenience store, and Ross had an unfortunate habit of smoking. So Ross was going in to get a pack of Camel Lights. Well, as he was doing that, a gentleman turned around with a pack of Marlboro Reds in his hand. And yes, indeed, it was Dean Smith. We had just won the national championship a few months earlier, and here Ross is face-to-face with Dean. And so Ross says, Coach, hey, I'm Ross. You know, and he kind of got enough stuff out to let Dean know what was going on with him. Told him that he was in the journalism school, he was in advertising, he was going to graduate the next year, he was from Dunn, his parents were still there, they were getting close to retirement, and he was visiting his sister in Washington, D.C. She had gotten a job up at a PR firm right there. And Dean very, very kindly listened to him, said, you know, really nice to meet you, Ross Rollins. And Ross, would you do me a favor? And Ross said, sure, Coach, anything. And Dean said, would you not tell anybody about this? So Dean had a pretty bad habit there. When he was in the locker room for halftime, they say he smoked 3 or 4 cigarettes as well before he went back on the court. That's an unfortunate situation. Now, maybe that had something to do with Dean, but for Alzheimer's to take a mind like a steel trap and to do what it did to Dean Smith, some of us are just going to probably get Alzheimer's anyway. So what if? What if there was a drug, unlike the current FDA-approved drugs, that simply slow Alzheimer's down? Many of you are familiar with the names Namenda and Aricept. What if there was a drug that could possibly prevent Alzheimer's? Any of you interested in learning more about that? That's awesome, because my fellow Guilford Rotarian Scott Witt here of Greensboro Clinical Trials is here with us today. And he's actually accepting participants between the ages of 60 to 75 who have a family history of Alzheimer's, but who haven't been diagnosed with dementia, into a current clinical trial. And yes, this drug has shown great promise in preventing Alzheimer's. Hope you'll take an opportunity to speak to Scott afterwards. Participants will get the best medical care money can't buy, because it doesn't cost anything, and may be compensated for time and travel as well. The clinical trial is currently in phase 2, Scott, right? And Scott will have more information after the meeting today. And I'll just say that if I was in that age bracket, 60 to 75, I'd be in the trial. So here are my boogers. We went on a little trip to Savannah a few weeks ago. We got on one of those airheads and got drugged behind a boat at 40 some miles an hour. I found out after I came back those are illegal now. They don't sell them anymore because too many people have lost their life on it. So I survived. My kids did too. And we had a great time. That's Emerson. She's 8. Oliver, and yes, he is that big of a ham, will be 6 next month. He's in an 8-year-old body. And he wins every battle, but she's faster than him. So if she can get away, she does. So if I don't do something about Alzheimer's, chances are at least one of my kids will develop Alzheimer's itself. You see, kids today have a great chance of living past age 100. And since science tells us that those of us who reach 85 have a 50% chance of developing dementia, would you folks humor me for a minute? Would you just look at the person beside you? Just turn to the person beside you. Go ahead. Yep. One of you will probably develop Alzheimer's. And I know what you're thinking. You're hoping it's them. And they're hoping it's you, and that's okay. So I want each of you to know the toll that Alzheimer's takes on a family. Someone here may be living it right now. My prayers are with you. Some might have even lost loved ones recently. So I told you at the beginning of my presentation today that I wanted my children to know Alzheimer's. They don't really have a clue what Alzheimer's is right now. They don't really understand why Daddy keeps taking blue buckets all over the place with him to speak to Rotary clubs, or why he wears that shiny golden pin on his suit jacket. One day they will know that Alzheimer's took the lives of both of my paternal grandparents, even though only one was diagnosed with it. You see, Alzheimer's isn't just about the journey at the end of someone else's life. This is my grandmama, Violet, before the caregiving for my granddaddy had taken its toll on her. We had a very special relationship, and my daughter's name is Emerson Violet. This is Christmas of 2015, after Grandmama had aged over 2 decades in a very few short years that she tried to be a caregiver for her husband of over 60 years. She slipped away on Mother's Day in 2016, and it was a blessing. So if you know someone who is currently a caregiver for a loved one with Alzheimer's, there's a good chance that they may end up in worse shape than the one that they cared for. And yes, primary caregivers are 71% more likely to die than their non-caregiving peers of the same age. 71% more likely to die. So as I told you earlier, I want my children to know Alzheimer's the way that they will also know polio. That there once was a dreaded disease that killed millions of people, including their great-granddaddy, and that their daddy, with a lot of help from the CART Fund and from awesome people like you, help make it go away. Thank you.
Guys, Gary, thank you. That was for sharing a very intimate part of your experience with Alzheimer's. Do we have any questions? Surely. You have some things.
Questions. One question that on the exercise part, were you talking about Physical or mental exercises?
Actually, physical exercise. There's very little clinical evidence that doing crosswords or anything like that really helps. Physical exercise is actually more important than the mental side of things. Yeah, don't give up your New York Times crosswords, guys. Seriously, that's a great thing. Social interactions are important. What we're doing here today, being in a club with other people as well. But exercise is really, really key. Pumping the blood. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with the study that UNCG did about 3-4 years ago on physical exercise related to Alzheimer's dementia?
I'm not, but please tell us.
I participated in that, and they published a paper a while back, and I think it'd be something that would be helpful to tie in. The coordination of brain stimulus and physical exercise was the premise, and the findings were quite significant. It's done by the Department of Sports Physiology, the UNCG. Bill Carper is the professor, so it might be interesting to look into that.
Fantastic. If you could email some information to Walt or Chip, I'm sure they can get that to you. And thank you for that. And you know, Karen Pollard, that's one of the reasons she hops around up here when she goes around talking to folks. There are some mental things that we can do to help ourselves remember specific things. And that brain boot camp that Karen does really helps people with memory issues, right? So for instance, I know that guy's name right there is Chip. Why do I know his name is Chip? Because when I look at him, unfortunately, I think of Chips Ahoy, and I can't help it. It's just one of those things, right?
They're fantastic. My favorite.
Who could forget Chip, right? But the bottom line with it is that we remember certain people or certain things by the moment in which we implanted that or ingrained it on our brain. So yes, the brain boot camps can help just with basic memory issues. Other questions?
What about sleep?
Yeah, sometimes I'll mention the circadian clock. One of our researchers doing a lot of that as well. Exercise, sleep, a Mediterranean diet, turmeric, all this stuff. You know, we could live forever if we really got all that. 7.5 hours of sleep. And interestingly, our circadian rhythm, circadian clock, the way that it works is based a lot on the sun. So people who work third shift, for instance, who go in at night and then come home in the morning and then they hopefully will get into a dark room where they can sleep, those folks are much more likely to develop Alzheimer's as well, unfortunately. I will say this finally, we talked about the $1 million that we want to raise by 2020. Got some unfortunate news recently. Roger Ackerman, our founder, has pancreatic cancer, and he will not be around for our May meeting. That's next May at our board meeting. So we have a goal, many of the other district chairs and our executive director, that we're going to go ahead, we're going to get that $1 million this year. So let's think about ways that we can be creative and do that. Within your club, corporate matches, having someone at your club, for instance, do a match challenge where they stand up for about 2 minutes, they tell their Alzheimer's story, and then they say, hey, I want to match up to X amount of dollars that go into the blue buckets today. That's a great opportunity to really boost some of your fundraising. I will say by personal experience that you want to put a cap on the amount of money that you're going to match up to. Because when you tell your club that you're going to match and you don't give a cap, $437 goes into the bucket. And you find yourself writing a big check. Carrie and I were glad to do that, and again, Thrivent matched that last year. But yeah, $50, $100, maybe $200, put a cap on it. And you'll find out that you will get that money. You'll probably get more. The Kernersville Club yesterday, gentleman who presented, who also has these little coin boxes that he's putting all around Kernersville. That's my hometown. Right now, they're raising hundreds of dollars a week from these little coin boxes that he's putting in barbecue joints, convenience stores, and things like that. I'll be getting some information out to the clubs in our district about that too. What a simple opportunity to get that information out and to have people throwing their loose change in there. About 3 minutes left. We good?
I for one are gonna dig deep, stretch, and throw a little folded money in the bucket. How about that?
Thank you, brother.
Who else can do that?
Who's got some C? Who's got some C on us today?
Oh,
Fantastic.
come on, guys and girls.
Gary, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us. This is such an important. Alzheimer's, when you think about polio, we have gone so far to knocking out polio. We're okay, this close. I mean, what do we do when polio is eradicated? I would be a big advocate for saying Alzheimer's would be a great target for our next area of support. Alzheimer's is horrendous, and I'm going to challenge you guys. Let's don't make it coins for Alzheimer's Research Trust. Let's put let's make that cash. And I'll take you up on it, Gary. I'll match whatever goes into the blue buckets today up to $100. Would anyone else match me doing that?
I'll
do
match
it.
on that.
Okay. Ross, thank you. You got two people that'll match whatever goes in the buckets today.
I'll match.
Oh my gosh, okay. You guys, my memory may not remember everyone that does this. I've got you 3, 4, okay.
Mine will.
So please email me and I'll get you the final tally. Again, do you know what we do with this money? What do we do with it throughout the year? We take that to the district conference, and then we'll make a contribution at district conference. Although this year we may need to do it a little bit differently. Gary, maybe you and I can talk about.
Yeah, well, and I'll just mention this real quick too. Your club already, based on what happened at the district conference this year, you guys are in the top 5 per capita, based on the money that you raise and the size of your club, to send your president, who may or may not like go-kart racing, but by the end of the day, I can promise you he will like go-kart racing. We got anybody here been to the GoPro Motorplex down in Mooresville? Holy cow! Dan, I know we had a lot of good times down there. 57 miles an hour is not really that fast, but when your butt is that far off the ground, it's fast. GoProMotorplex.com, check it out. We're going to have the Go-Karts for Kart 3rd annual competition. It's just a fun day, but all of our fundraising will be done during the year, and you guys have an opportunity to send chips.